You've been there. We've all been there. You start playing a game that everyone has hyped up, and before you get an hour into it, you are bored out of your freaking mind. You put it down, and then the next time you talk about it, somebody inevitably hits you with, well, you didn't play it long enough to get to the good parts. And honestly, that's one of the most frustrating and infuriating things to hear. What are we even doing here if I have to treat a game like some kind of unpaid internship where I'm grinding away just to eventually have fun? It's not like going to the gym where the payoff happens way later down the road. No, it's a video game, which is just another form of entertainment. You telling me I have to pay money and then trudge through hours of meaningless content to get to the good stuff? You telling me a shrimp fried this rice? I had to, I'm sorry. The issue boils down to a basic principle. A game has to respect your time. I don't think that that's an unreasonable expectation. If a game can't hook me in the first couple of hours, or at least show me why I should stick around, then why should I keep playing it? Imagine if you were trying a new restaurant and the waiter came up to you and told you, oh, don't judge it based on the appetizers. Yeah, the entrees are really good after you've been sitting here for 3 hours. I promise. What would you honestly say? Would you stay? Probably not. You'd probably be confused and hungry. And yet, in gaming, this idea of slogging through mediocrity just to get to the good stuff is somehow normalized. I'll touch on this later in the video, but you shouldn't blame the people who tell you that the good stuff comes later on. You should blame the developers. As frustrating as it is to hear someone say, oh, you didn't play it long enough, it's not their fault. It's the devs' fault. Let's start with Cyberpunk 2077 because I think that's a good example. I know CD Projekt Red has done a lot of fixes to the game since launch, but back when it first came out, it was a disaster. Glitches, crashes, T-posing NPCs, quests that wouldn't progress, you name it. The opening hours of Cyberpunk were rough, and for a lot of people, that kind of ruined the entire experience. Some fans on the internet were like, oh, the game gets good later on, but by the time later on rolls around, I'm already burnt out. Like, sorry, I don't want to play this game anymore. I distinctly remember looking through Twitter and looking at Reddit to see if the game gets any better at any point, and that's just a red flag altogether if you have to Google that. If a game launches in a state where it's barely playable, it doesn't matter how good the story is or how much the world opens up later on. That first impression is what sticks, and that really matters in today's world because our attention spans and dopamine sensors are pretty much fried, let's be honest. Another classic example is Final Fantasy XIII. Now, I have not played this game, but I am familiar with the memes of people saying how you have to play for almost a whole day to get to the good stuff. It gets good after 20 hours. 20 hours? That's insane. By the time that you get to like those more open, less linear parts of the game, which I've heard, you've already spent an entire work week trudging through corridor after corridor, spamming the auto battle button. Like sure, I mean, I've heard that the combat systems get like more complex later and the story picks up a little bit more, but why should I have to wait that long? Like, why wasn't the engaging part of the game front and center? If the developers knew it got good after 20 hours, maybe they should have restructured the game so the good parts come earlier. Like, developers don't even have to give us the whole cake in the beginning of the game. Just let players lick the spoon to know what to expect later on. I feel like that's a perfect analogy. Let players lick the spoon while they wait for the cake to bake. Even a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't immune to this criticism. Now, I love Red Dead 2. It is one of my favorite games ever. But let's be honest, the opening hours are slow. Crawling through those snowy mountains with barely any action to speak of, like, that's a tough sell for someone who doesn't already know what's coming later on, or somebody who's never heard of Red Dead Redemption. For some people, that slow pace works because it sets the tone and it builds immersion, but for others, it's just a chore. I really enjoyed the prologue for Red Dead Redemption 2 because I knew what was coming later on in the game. If you didn't make it past the snowy prologue, like, I wouldn't blame you. It's a great game, but you shouldn't have to endure hours of setup to finally feel like you're having fun. And I know some people might disagree with that opinion on Red Dead, but there's a reason why there's a mod that lets you skip the prologue, just saying. This issue isn't just about pacing, though. It's also about the way games are designed. Some games like Destiny rely on like grind-heavy gameplay loops that only start to feel rewarding after you've sunk like 100 hours into it. Fans of those games will tell you like, oh, you need to hit in-game to see what it's really about. Like, end game is when the game starts. But why should I have to grind through repetitive missions and bland story content to reach the fun part? If the early game doesn't feel rewarding, why would I believe the late game will be any different? I feel like the grind kind of games though are a bit different because you're constantly upgrading your gear. So I want to shift this video's focus back to single player experiences. Then there's games like The Witcher 3, which that's a pretty interesting balance. The opening hours are really slower paced, but they're still engaging enough to keep you playing. The writing, the characters, the world building are so strong that you don't mind if the gameplay isn't like immediately thrilling. Not to mention it's just absolutely gorgeous, which I've mentioned in a previous video before, and that was enough to keep me hooked, even during the slow start. But that's the key difference though, right? A slow start isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it needs to be interesting. If the early game isn't fun or intriguing or interesting, then why should players bother sticking around for the good parts? I do wonder though how difficult it actually is for devs to hook somebody in the beginning of a game. I know I'm primarily a Bethesda focused channel, so I'll use Bethesda as an example here. I feel like Bethesda nails the hook. A hook meaning something that draws you in and wants you to put more time into the game. In Elder Scrolls games, Bethesda uses the hook that you're a prisoner and then something insane happens like the Emperor coming into your jail cell or a dragon attacking during your execution. And then you're trying to escape that threat, and then once you've escaped, you're met with a breathtaking walkout moment where you're free to explore, but you also have a primary objective to go and do if you choose to do so. And every Bethesda game gives you a reason to keep playing. Like Oblivion tells you need to deliver the Amulet of Kings. Skyrim tells you need to go warn of a dragon attack. Fallout 3 tells you have to find your father. Fallout 4 tells you need to find your son. It sounds so simple, and Bethesda nails it every time, and that's why I wonder if it's actually difficult to hook a player in the beginning of a game. This whole idea of like not playing long enough ties into a bigger issue with gaming culture, and that's the way that we frame time as an investment. People will say, like, just for example, you've already spent 5 hours on it, you might as well keep going, like, as if those 5 hours weren't enough of a loss. It's like a sunk cost fallacy, where players feel obligated to stick with a game just because they've already put time into it. But here's the thing, time isn't free, okay? If a game wastes your time up front, you're not obligated to keep giving it more chances. I know people in real life that think my refund habits on Steam are insane, but I take advantage of that system. If I'm not enjoying my first few hours in a game, I refund it. Like, call me crazy, but I think that's perfectly reasonable to do. It's just my opinion that if a game can't give me a good reason to stick around, I should not stick around. That doesn't make it a bad game overall, it just makes me wonder where my time and money is going to be going later down the road. I have a Steam graveyard of games that have like 5 hours, 7 hours, 10 hours of playtime because I realized too far down the road that it just wasn't for me and I was wasting my time. And these games, like all of them they all showed me what I was going to be getting in the beginning, and I was expecting it to change in the middle of the end, and it just didn't. It's just the same stuff throughout the whole game. I think the core of the issue is that developers and publishers sometimes expect too much patience from players. They assume that people are just going to stick around for the payoff, but I mean, that's not always the case. A game has to earn your time and attention, not demand it. If the opening hours don't deliver, then the game has failed its most important job, and that's making a good first impression. After thinking more on this topic while making this video, you honestly can't blame the people who say, you just haven't played it long enough. It's not their fault the game is created that way. It's the developers. I don't really understand why a studio would accidentally or purposefully not give a strong start to a game that will keep players invested. Like when I make my YouTube videos, I never think to myself, well, I'll just save all the good parts for the end. Like, what? If I saved all the good parts at the end, nobody would watch the beginning. Okay, there needs to be a balance in there somewhere. It needs to be a roller coaster that starts you up and then down, up and down, up and down. That's why Mr. Beast got so popular. Love him or hate him, but his videos still get incredible views. That's because he's screaming whatever insane idea he has at the beginning of the video, and you're like, oh shit, he ain't lying. Let's see how this plays out. Ultimately, the whole you didn't play it long enough argument, it shifts the responsibility onto the player when really it's the game's responsibility to be engaging from the start. And that is so key. It's so key. It really does. It shifts all responsibility on the player. It's like, it's your fault. Your time is valuable, and you shouldn't feel bad for walking away from a game that didn't respect your time. So the next time somebody tells you didn't play it long enough to get to the good parts, just remind them that you don't owe a game anything. If it couldn't hook you, that's not your fault. It's the game's fault. I feel as if gaming culture, especially for older people like in their mid-20s to mid-30s, wants you to feel like you're the problem if you don't enjoy the game. I don't think I'm not enjoying as many games because I'm getting older. I think I'm not enjoying them because they're just not giving me something to want to enjoy. There's been only like a handful of cases in my life where I've played a video game, didn't really like it, and then I tried it again and enjoyed it. And most of that was because there was a learning curve of some sorts, not because the game didn't give me something interesting to want to pursue. The two that come to mind are Hell Let Loose and Stellaris. Both of these games were a learning curve for me. Hell Let Loose just had a confusing map and like slower gameplay I didn't understand. I didn't think the game wasn't interesting, I just didn't know how to play it. Same thing with Stellaris, like that was my first Paradox game and I didn't really understand how to play it, but like after taking some time and trying things out, I ended up really enjoying it. And that's the distinct difference in games like Hell Let Loose or Starfield. I know they're two completely different genres, but one just needed me to learn a little bit more, and the other one made me feel like I was wasting my time playing it. So the next time somebody tells you you didn't play it long enough, just smile and send them this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I really enjoy seeing what you guys comment and when you tell me your thoughts and opinions. Even if they're negative, I think we can still find some common ground. Please make sure to subscribe, share the video because that helps me out a lot, and I'll hopefully see you soon. See ya.